This morning we're going to talk about the 5.9 release, what's different about it, and the new elements of it. This release has been a trial of Rockpile's Resolve, I think, over the last few weeks or few months actually. Halfway through the development cycle of TBC version 5.9, Trimble advised us that they were upgrading the programming language associated with the TML programming. So they went from IronPython 2 to IronPython 3, which on the face of it, you'd think is okay, that's just an update of the programming language. But in that process, the difference between the IronPython programming language for version 3 and version 2 is quite significant. And a lot of the commands that we had for version 5.81 and earlier were not compatible with 5.9 anymore. And so we had to rework pretty much every command in the library to make them fully compatible with 5.9. And as a result of doing all that work, we kind of realized that this was going to be a much bigger job than we first expected. And so we doubled down, and we spent the last 3.5 months pretty much with 2 developers working almost full time on making the 5.9 release happen. And so what we're going to talk about is the differences between the two, what that means to you as users, and how they might differentiate in terms of use. But in the process of doing this, we also took the opportunity to, because we were revisiting and opening up every command, we basically took the opportunity to take the chance to make a lot of improvements to the command structure, to standardize some things that we, when you've been developing software over a period of time, like 3.5 years now for Rockpile, things you developed 3.5 years ago, we've learned a lot in 3.5 years, and we've improved our methodology significantly. We built a lot of libraries that are incorporated in newer commands, but in the older commands, we'd never gone back and revisited those. So now we've had a chance to go back and rework a lot of the stuff to make a lot of consistency changes in the product. So really what you're going to see in today's presentation is a lot of refinement, if you like, a lot of general improvements in the products, some new ideas that really help work process, and so especially for new users or people in real high production environments, you're going to see some fairly significant changes for yourselves in terms of how fast you can move now in terms of getting things done, and talk a little bit about what we've been doing alongside this development effort and how that's going to roll out over the next 6 to 8 weeks. We haven't stopped developing new stuff, but because this was such a big release, we decided that we wouldn't incorporate any specifically new commands in this release. There has been some updates to things like the piling commands, but that's about the only one that we've really spent any time on, and that was because we're doing it in parallel with this development effort. But most of the commands have been updated, improved. There's some neat changes that I think are going to make a big difference in a lot of people's daily work, and we'll kind of walk through what those look like and how they pan out. So I'm going to start off with a presentation rather than just showing TBC. We'll jump to TBC in about 20 minutes or so, and I'll show you the highlights in reality. But I wanted to talk about some of the changes first and how that really affects you. So today the package will be released. It will be put out on the website this afternoon after this presentation is completed. It will be done by mid-afternoon, we hope. We did get the final version from the developers yesterday. I have gone through that final version and done the final test on it to make sure that everything still holds together. And we've done a decent amount of installation testing to make sure it's solid and robust and it works. And so we're now in a position where we can say that the package will be released this afternoon. The release is, as I say, it's extremely significant from the amount of time and effort it's taken us to both develop it and test it and QA it and improve some of the documentation and some of the help systems associated with the commands in the process of getting this product to market. And as a user, you might look at it and go, well, there's nothing really that new in it until you start using it. And then you're going to see some fairly major changes, some fairly major improvements in terms of just pure workflow and pure productivity changes. So the main thing that's in this release is the support for TBC version 5.9, which is the IronPython change that Trimble imposed upon us. They also made some other changes. Trimble has a lot of connections or a lot of sales into US military and the US military raised an issue with the way that some of the folders were getting created as part of the installation, and they insisted on administration rights being applied to all folders that get created by the Trimble Business Center implementation, and that you needed administration rights to be able to do a full installation. So Trimble has added admin rights onto the macro command folders, which on the face of it doesn't make that much difference. But when you start thinking about TML status and how TML status needs to update commands on the fly, you don't want to have administration rights every time you want to do that. So we had a lot of work to do to work around that and improve our processes so that we can do an installation under the requirements of having admin rights on the first day. But once you've installed the first version of the macro commands 3, you can then update them with TML status without having to have admin rights on your computer. So that was a fairly big change for us. And then the other big change is because TBC 5.9 is not compatible with TBC 5.81 and earlier, that basically means we now have 2 versions of all commands that we have to support and manage going forward. And that means we have to have 2 sets of data on our servers, and TML status needs to understand that. And when you're doing a 5.81 update, it needs to understand to find the 5.81 compatible commands. And if you're doing a 5.9 update, it needs to understand it's looking for the 5.9 update. So the 2 sets of commands are completely separate. They're completely independent of each other, and they're not cross-compatible. So you can't just copy a command from a 5.81 folder into a 5.9 folder and expect it to work, because there are significant changes in the way that IronPython 3 works compared to IronPython 2. And these go extremely deep into the software. I can't stress it enough. This has been a fairly major overhaul of our package, and it's been a good process for us to learn kind of how to make sure we can manage this kind of thing in the future if it should happen again. But and I think we're in much better shape as a business going forward as a result of those changes. But it is very significant. So all commands, every command in the library has been updated in some way. They've all been updated to 3.0. They've all been checked and verified against 3.0 Python. They've had changes made because Python 3.0 broke stuff. And we've had to then make a 5.8 version that works with the Python 2 code and a version 5.9 version that works with the 3.0 code. And so managing that and going through the testing of that has been extremely significant. So this release is applicable to 5.9 and higher of TBC only. There will be an update for 5.81 at some point in the next few weeks. We are in the process of doing the testing now on all the 5.81 versions of the commands. Now we've fixed them all to work with 5.9. We're going back through and doing another complete test cycle on all of the 5.81 commands, and depending on how well that goes, will dictate how fast we bring the 5.81 package to market. So but because the commands aren't changing in terms of, let's say, large amounts of new features and functions, the command library that we already have for 5.81 is almost exactly the same as the 5.9, with the differences that I'm going to explain here. So yes, we know that you're going to want the 5.9 improvements to 5.81, but we had to prioritize this 5.9 because we have nothing for that release at this point. So that's become our priority. We focused on that. We've got that to market today, and the 5.81 will come in due course as soon as we get through the second round of testing. So that started, and hopefully it won't take that long, but we're giving ourselves 30 days to be able to achieve that, just in case we hit any major snags in that. Now, we've been testing the commands as we go, but we haven't done a detailed deep dive test on everything at this point. So that's going to start, as I say, right now. So the biggest changes you're going to see in this release are that all commands now have header bar commands. So we've spent a lot of time in this release providing a mechanism by which we can add header bar commands to every command. So we control that through a spreadsheet in the back end that allows me to go in and say, okay, I need to move those header bar commands around. I need to put this command in. I need to take this one out. And so if you feel like there's header bar commands that need to be added or removed to make a workflow that you use all the time more productive, please let us know, because we're open to the idea of changing them. But what we've tried to do is we've been through every single command in the library and said, okay, if this was a hub command, in other words, if you go into this command to take part of a process, what other tools would you want to use while you're in here? And let's make those available to you while you're in the command. And so give an example. if you take our slip-form paving workflow that has several commands, it has the optimize line strings to make the lines curvilinear in both horizontal and vertical. It has the explode lines command that allows you to explode the lines so that they're ready for paving or slip-form paving. Then it has the extend lines function that allows you to extend the lines so you get a lead in and a lead out for every line that you're going to put in the paver. And then it has an export to land XML. So those 4 commands kind of go together to make a workflow. So if you start any one of those 4 commands in the header, the other 3 commands will be in the sequence in the header bar for you, along with some other commands that you might need, like maybe you need break or join or trim or extend, or you might need point cloud processor or create region or something like that in the command structure, not that particular workflow, but in other workflows. And so we put we have up to sort of 10 header commands available to us. We can put in more, but then it becomes a pull down menu. But we've tried to use up to 10 as a sort of standard that allows us to say, while you're doing this, these are the other 10 things that you might find useful, in addition to RPS settings and help, which is in every single command. And so now you can go into any of our commands, and if they're part of a work process, you can now get access to all the other commands that might be relative. So take an example like point creator. You might want to create a point by using the create point command. You might want to use the station and offset points. You might want to use radial points or radial point script, or you might want to use the create points command or the point creator command itself. So all of those commands that you can use to create points are now in the header command of the point creator tool. So when you're in there, you're using point creator, but if you want to create some points manually, you can pick one of the other methods, jump to that command, run that function to create the few points you need, and then come back to point creator to carry on. So every one of our commands now becomes like a hub center for other work processes that you might need to use at the same time. Take point cloud processor. You might need to sample the region. You might need to create a region. You might need to add to a region. You might need to create a surface model. You might need to contour that surface model. So things that go into that linear workflow where we start with a point cloud file that we bring in, we need to add a boundary, so we can draw a boundary using a header command. Then we need to sample the region, so we sample the region using a header bar command. Then we might need to exclude some areas, so we use the point cloud by boundary command to find that area, and then we want to put that into a new region, so we either say create region or we add it to an existing region. So all of those buttons now work in the header, so that instead of having to remember, I'm going to jump to that menu and then that menu and this menu and that menu, or use toolbars, the toolbar is now embedded in the command, and that makes it a lot easier and a lot faster to move around. And it means you can now do more linear processes much faster than you could do before. And when you get into the habit of using them, you're going to find they are stunningly fast to be able to move from one function to the next, to the next, to the next, without ever having to look at the menus or the toolbars. And I think this is the most significant change we've made. And certainly we're going to invest more effort into this kind of approach of making like little wizard functions within the software to make it possible for people to execute linear work processes faster. So I think this is probably the biggest change we've made, and every command has it now. And we can modify it really quickly now and re-release an update which has changes. If people think the header commands need to be modified, just let us know. As I say, we're keen to make that header command work process something that's really slick for everybody. And then lastly, all the commands now have the question mark key in the header bar. They have the F1 key to get access to the help, and they have the command tips. And in command tips, you get sort of command specific help in the command tips, but you also have a help button there as well. So as I say, we're really focused on helping people and trying to provide support to people, and self-help is really important. And so we're putting more and more effort into that, giving you the help on demand in all the commands and making it easy for you to find it. So it will show you that as we get into the process today. And then beyond that, because we've updated a lot of commands, some of the commands have had improved UI. We've improved things like the highlighting functionality in different commands where we have a global selection and then primary and secondary selections all going on at the same time. So we've done a lot of work around highlighting, and show direction has been embedded more. We've started to incorporate things like our rock grips functionality into some of the commands that we thought were maybe important. We're going to add it to more over the next few weeks. We're going to start adding it into more and more places. We've now productized that so we can add it to commands very quickly. So we've done a lot of kind of plumbing work that's going to help us really accelerate and give you that better experience onto the commands as we move forward. And you'll see that as we go into this. So which versions of TBC are supported by version 5.9 of our package? So at this time, the release package is developed for TBC version 5.9 and higher only. If you're using 5.81 and earlier, then just use the 5.8 installation package. They are completely separately installed on your computer, so there's no potential for conflict of getting the wrong commands in the wrong folder. The macro commands 3 are in a macro commands 3 folder, so you'll see in this picture on this page, there are 2 folders now in the program data Trimble folder, which is where all the macro commands are stored. Macro commands is the original macro commands folder, and that's for 5.8.1 and earlier. And that doesn't have any admin permissions at all because that's legacy now. And macro commands 3 is the new folder that Trimble created to support the 3.0 version of Python commands, and all TML commands for version 3 will now be in that location. And we take care of putting things in the right place through our installers, and TML status has been updated to make sure we manage that correctly. So you'll find that as a user, you won't even know that it's making a difference and it's putting in different locations. Just make sure if you're using 5.9 that you use the 5.9 installer to put the commands into the system. And we manage everything through that installation package today, and then TML status. As we make changes to the commands over the next few weeks, you'll be able to go back to using TML status to do your daily updates. So all commands are now stored in those separate folders, and there's no correlation. Do not try to copy commands out of the macro commands folder into macro commands 3 or vice versa, because they aren't compatible. So don't try to do that. TBC version 5.8.1 uses IronPython 2, which is the version 2 of the Python programming language. And we're now calling those macro 2. And then TBC version 5.9 plus uses IronPython 3, and that's macro 3. And that's why they have the macro commands 3 subfolder. IronPython 2 and IronPython 3 are not compatible with each other. So do not think you can just take a macro from an old version and put it in a new version and hope it works perfectly. It might run, it might not. If it does run, it may not work properly. So be aware of that. And that's one of the surprises that we had, is things that we thought would just compile and rework, they didn't. We had to rework things because of some changes in TBC and also some changes in the Python programming language that just made things incompatible. So you have to basically work the commands for each version completely separately. You can't assume that one will work in the other unless it's a very basic command. So command library installer will be made available this afternoon. It will be on our website and you'll be able to download it from there. So just go to the rockpilesolutions.com website and keep an eye on that during the afternoon. And you'll find at some point during the afternoon, there'll be a 5.9 package posted there. Download that. Once you've closed TBC and waited 30 seconds, you can then run the installer. It will require you to have admin privileges the first time you install it, because it has to create some folders within that macro commands 3 folder. But once those have been created, those are set up so they don't need admin privileges, which allows us to then update after that first installation without having administrator rights. So when you do the installation, it's going to ask you for admin rights if your computer is set up that way with your login, and then you're going to need to get an IT person to assist you to make that first installation. But after that first installation, you should not be asked for that again. So if you install another package in a few weeks' time, or you use TML status to do updates going forward, anytime in the future, you won't have a problem. You should just be able to install, unless you ever go back in and delete the folders we're creating for some reason. You should never have a request for admin privileges in the future. So we've tried to make it as seamless as possible, but we cannot get around that first admin privilege. Unfortunately, that's just something Trimble has imposed on us. And as a result, that's something you need to take care of on your end. So our 5.9 installer takes care of all of the new data structures, all of the new folder systems, and any changes that Trimble have imposed upon us. And so you shouldn't really see anything other than that admin privilege request. And otherwise, it should be basically the same as business as usual in the previous command libraries that we've released. So administrative privileges, you will be asked for that. So that was forced on us because of a change by Trimble. And I understand the need for that. And it is probably good software development practice to, if you're building folders which will contain software, it's probably the right thing to have administration rights on it, at least initially. And if you're doing mass distribution in large organizations, it's the safest approach. And so we've gone along with that. It's not ideal, but it's just what it is. As I say, you will be asked for that administration rights the first time you install, but after that, you shouldn't be asked for that. And then TML status, once you start using that again, that will work just fine. And our backend servers that you don't really ever see, but our backend servers where we keep all the TMLs and where we do all the referencing between what's installed on your computer and what's available, and then telling you what needs to be updated, etc. That has all been managed now so that you can see there's a TML. If you're running version 5.9, when you run TML status, it's going to look for 5.9 updates. And if you're using 5.81 and earlier, it's going to look for 5.8 TMLs and 5.8 updates and only give you those available. Now, at this point, I want to make one comment. At this point, we don't know how much effort it's going to be to get our 5.81 package up to the same level as 5.9. It might be done already, and we may find that there's absolutely no problems whatsoever, in which case that's going to make our life a lot easier going forward. But the challenge for any software company trying to support two versions in parallel and keep two versions going up at the same rate is extremely time consuming on testing and QA as well as on development. And it creates a kind of what we call an iterative problem where if we update a 5.9 TML and it's working in 5.9, then we test it in 5.8 and we find it's broken, then we have to fix it to work in 5.8, then we have to test it again in 5.9 to see if that fix broke anything in 5.9, and it can be an iterative kind of process, and it's extremely time consuming and extremely likely to create problems in the future at some point. And so depending on how hard that is for us to manage, we may find that we'll do a 5.9 release and then a 5.8 release at some point after that. We're going to try to keep the two versions up to date as much as possible, but just understand the burden that it creates if you try to build one set of commands that you can use in two locations. It's extremely difficult to do that and get it right. So we're likely to divorce the two versions and keep 5.9 on its own track and 5.8 on its own track so that they don't cross over and we don't have to do that iterative testing, because that's just extremely time consuming. And for a small company like us, could potentially kill us. This 5.9 release, as I say, the guys have been, I have to give Win and Peter a huge amount of credit for what they've done in this release. As I say, as users, you're going to look at it and go, it's just another update. But under the hood, there has been so many changes. And from a testing and QA point, I can't thank my team, Chris, Shane, Fergus, Trev, enough for the work that they've all put in to help me get through this QA and testing burden, because it's been enormous in this release. And we cannot afford to do that on a regular basis for every little release we do. So we're in the process of reviewing what that looks like going forward, and just want you all to be aware of it today, that we're going to try to keep these two things up to date in parallel, and we'll do as good a job as we can. But just understand that the long-term outlook is probably that 5.9 and higher will be obviously the version going forward. That's the latest TBC version. In a year or two's time, that's going to be the product platform that everybody's is basing everything off in that version of TMLs. So the 5.8 work in the long term is not really viable to keep that going indefinitely. But certainly for a year, 18 months, we can probably justify it. But after that, we're going to be looking for people to be on 5.9 or higher at that point to get the latest, greatest stuff from us. We'll continue to maintain the 5.8 package as we have it at least, and we'll try to add new functionality to that as we go forward. But if you really want the latest, greatest stuff from us, then you're really going to have the latest, greatest stuff from Trimble as well at the same time going forward. It's going to be inevitably, it's going to have some effect on us in the next 18 months as this goes forward, right? So I just want everybody aware of that today, that, if you're the kind of company that's using version 5.5 or 5.6 of TBC, then you're not chasing the latest, greatest stuff anyway. So 5.8 package will satisfy you, and any changes we can keep up to date on that will help you keep moving forward. But the 5.9, for those of you who are keeping yourself up to date, keeping your licenses renewed, well, I know there's a fear of each Trimble release, you wait for the patch because the 5.9 release probably has some bugs and defects in it. This release has actually been pretty solid, I think, from Trimble. And now they've got the platform out. Hopefully you don't have to take every update because you've got a set of macro commands that have been kept alive for that that version. But there is an impact here, and at some point you really should be considering updating your warranty and getting up to the latest version, and taking that going forwards, to keep yourself as up to date as possible with us. And you will always get the latest, greatest stuff first in 5.9 and higher, purely and simply because we're developing for that, and then we're backing it down into 5.81 as a secondary action, because that's the latest version that people should be using of the software. So just be aware of that change. So the configuration, menu configuration, we've introduced a new version of the menu file that we provide. That's up on our community. If you go to the TBC libraries and templates on the community, if you're a subscriber, you can go into that category and find the TBC version 5.9 files, and in there you'll find the Rockpile 5.9a ribbon. There's been some changes to that. You can see at the bottom, this is a picture of the ribbon as it is with this release. So there's 5 Rockpile menus now that you can take advantage of. The normal ones are data prep and modeling. Modeling has been changed a little bit by removing drafting and reporting and exports out of the modeling tab into the reporting tab. So we created a new tab to give us a bit of room for expansion because our menus were beginning to get a little full. And we've moved some of the functionality out of Toolshed, like the exports, into the reporting. So we've put all of the drafting, all of the reporting, and all of the import-export type stuff we do into the reporting menu. And then Toolshed is now really becoming system tools, like things like Menu Manager, Textile Manager, things like that, and on all the access to the Rockpile websites, but also things like special applications. So our special applications work is growing. We're doing a lot of work around solar farms and piling right now, for example. And so those are becoming, bigger and bigger applications. And Toolshed will eventually probably split into special applications like point clouds and piling are the 2 biggest ones that we have on that menu right now. And in the longer term, that's likely to split as those get bigger and more capable, because we're putting a huge amount of development effort into things like point cloud processing and how to get the best results for construction out of those, and then also for the solar farm piling workflow. And I'm sure there will be other workflows, a bit like the slipform paving workflow we've done previously. Those kind of things are becoming more and more requested of Rockpile. Is, can you provide a dedicated turnkey solution for this kind of problem? And we're putting a lot of time and effort into that as a company, along with trying to build more and more tools to make these sort of data prep and takeoff workflows more efficient. So you'll see there's the data prep, modeling, reporting, and Toolshed menus. And then we've also added a 5th menu this time for the people that are not licensed users yet. They want to just use the free commands that we support for Trimble, as well as the free commands that Trimble ships with the product, or unlicensed commands, I should call them. So we created an unlicensed menu, and that menu contains all of the commands that we support for Trimble for free, and it contains the Trimble versions of the commands that they ship with the product. So some of you have called us over the last 6 to 12 months saying, I'm running this command, but I'm not getting the latest features for some reason. And that's because you're running I call it the blue command. The blue version is the Trimble version that they ship with the product. That's 3 years out of date. It doesn't have all of the Rockpile benefits and improvements that we've made to it. They decided to ship it. We gave them their code back and said, go ahead, do it. And they don't necessarily maintain or improve those. So if you want the latest, greatest version of things like convert to line string, then you need the Rockpile version of that, which is the orange version of the command. And by say orange, I'm talking about the icons have got those touches of orange in them, as opposed to the Trimble commands, which are the gray and blue icons. So if you want the latest, greatest version of any macro, then you really need to be using the Rockpile commands. But if you want to use the unlicensed ones for free, then they're all in the unlicensed menu. So you have everything on one menu. Then you can turn off the data prep, modeling, reporting, and Toolshed menus, because all you need is that one unlicensed menu. And we've grouped all the commands nicely on there for you, so you've got everything in one place. So that's a new thing. And then in the menu manager, once you've installed the menu, you go into the menu manager command, which is now on it's on the Toolshed menu, but it's also on the support menu in this configuration. You run menu manager, you can then reset menus, and that will then add the Rockpile menus to your menu configuration. And you can do that for any menu configuration. So if you've got your own, you can add our toolbars to that. And then you hit refresh icons. That just brings in the latest versions of all the icons. And then decide whether you want the unlicensed command menu or not. Now, all the unlicensed commands are in the other menu, so you don't need 2 copies of everything. So you can turn off the unlicensed menu by hitting the toggle unlicensed commands button in the menu manager, and that will turn off that menu if you don't need it. Or you can use the set ribbon tabs function in TBC support menu to just turn on and off the menus that you do or don't want. So if you don't have the whole package, you've only got data prep, for example, you can turn off modeling, reporting, and toolshed if you don't need those for some reason. Okay, so that's the menu configuration. And what you're going to find in our new menu configuration is we've taken quite a lot of effort in here to remove duplication. We really strongly believe in work process at Rockpile, and we go from image and PDF through data prep to elevate and model to takeoff, and then things like point cloud surfaces, advanced modeling corridors are kind of optional for depending on what kind of user you are. And then things like drafting and sheet layout, if you do plotting and producing drawings, then those are important to you. So you can see in the menu configuration, there's the main process steps, if you like: image and PDF, data prep, elevate and model, takeoff, point cloud surfaces. And you move from left to right across the menu ribbons. And then when you're in a menu ribbon, you typically move across the menu ribbon from left to right. And when you get to the right side, you've pretty much finished with that ribbon and you're ready to move to the next one in the sequence. So we've really focused on that, and we've tried to try to make some of the menus a little simpler. We've tried to eliminate the duplication where we put the same commands in multiple places. So if you're really doing a data prep process, go to the data prep menu. If you're doing elevate, go to the elevate menu, etc. And you'll find the commands there. And then we're focusing on the toolbars at the bottom of the menu there. Those are the things that you use all the time, like break, trim, join, extend, all those kind of commands. They're going to be on the toolbar there, and if you want to use them there, or they're available through shortcuts should you want to do that. But typically use the menus or the header bar commands now in the new version, or use the toolbars to get access to commands that aren't on the menu that you've got currently visible. But you'll find, I think, that the menu is a little simpler to look at. The commands that have been added to 5.9 by Trimble and anything new from our side has been restructured into this new menu configuration. So if you want to adopt our menu, go to this location, download the menu file and install it using the support customize ribbon and import, and then add our menus to that. Now, we don't ship the menus, the Rockpile menus, with that menu. And the reason why is because that's updating all the time, and therefore you should use Menu Manager to control that. So just go to Menu Manager and get used to doing that, and reset RPS menus, and that will update your system and give you the latest, greatest Rockpile menus at any time. So macro commands 3 folder structure, we talked about it a little bit earlier on. So to solve the administrative rights, we created our folder structure as follows. So you've got the macro commands 3 folder, then underneath that you'll find Rockpile Solutions and Trimble. And in the Rockpile Solutions folder, then you'll find some system level command stuff, which is our Rockpile custom controls and utilities and shim and stuff like that, which are things that we use to control a lot of our things like our new layer control or our show direction control. They're all centrally managed, and then all commands have access to those. So the things you find in that root folder for Rockpile Solutions are those kind of things. And then in the commands folder, you'll find every single command that's in our library. And that's where all the TMLs are stored, in the commands folder. Okay. Any unlicensed commands that are shipped with Trimble product are in the Trimble folder. So there's about 8 commands in that folder which ship out with Trimble 5.9, and we have absolutely nothing to do with that folder anymore. We've kept all of our stuff out of there. As part of this release, we've done a bit of refactoring of naming of commands to make sure that it's clearer that there are commands. We've made sure that, icons, help, support is all linked to the right command names. So there's been quite a lot of cleanup done in this process to get more consistency into our package, which sets us up for the future. What else do we have here? So macro commands that RPS develops and supports are in the Rockpile Solutions folder. So if Trimble isn't shipping a version of a command, then the command will be in our folder. If Trimble decides to ship a version of the command, then we make a Rockpile version of that, which has all our benefits on it. We make it separate to Trimble, and we'll continue to support our version, but we'll no longer support the Trimble version when Trimble decides to ship it with the product. We can't control what they do on that side at all, so we're letting them take care of that piece of it as they need to. Any duplicate commands, and there are some, like things like convert to line strings, there's a Trimble version of it, which has limited functionality. There's a Rockpile version that has more functionality. We test, QA, and document ours. We don't touch the Trimble version at all. but our version has the orange icon, the Trimble version has the blue icon. So when you look at your menus, if you're looking at a blue and gray icon, it's likely to be a Trimble command. If you're looking at an orange tinge command, then it's likely to be a Rockpile command. So commands that are not duplicates, that are maintained and supported by Rockpile, they'll be continued as unlicensed commands into the future, unless we add some significant functionality. And like we've done in the past, we'll either partially license or fully license the command, depending on how much work we put into that. But the free version will always be available. The free version will be available on the command pane in the list if it's taken off our menus, because we've got our own version of it, which has got more feature set. You'll always be able to get access to the unlicensed command. We continue to support those for Trimble as needed. So our menus, when you go to the unlicensed command at the bottom there, you can see the ribbon there. That's the unlicensed menu ribbon. There's about 30 odd commands on that menu, and you can see there's a mixture of blue commands and orange commands on there. The blue ones are the originals that Trimble ships with the product, and we don't touch those, but their version, our version, is now in our license folder group, and that's where the commands with the extended functionality now reside, because Trimble's shipping an older version with reduced functionality. You can use that for free, but our version is now licensed because we've got extended capabilities over and above what the Trimble command offers. So if you want to go to those commands, you'll find any of the updated commands in the data prep modeling, reporting, and toolshed menus. Okay, the unlicensed commands is all the ones that we support for free, and they're all the ones that Trimble ship as standard. Okay, so everything is on that menu, and it's all grouped into logical groups. So you've got the create edit group, the modify group, the surface modeling group, etc. So you can get access to the commands that you need. Okay, so this is just part of the continuous evolution of this kind of macro programming environment and how Trimble is evolving as a company around that. So RPS menu configuration for TBC 5.9, updated commands. We updated all the commands on the menus. We further reduced duplication of commands on different menus to make the workflows a little clearer. We've restructured the menus for some improved workflows and process steps. We've integrated all of the new RPS and all the new Trimble commands into those menus. RPS menus are now on 4 menus, plus the unlicensed commands for unlicensed users. We have a reporting menu for drafting, reporting, and exports, which is nice because now you go to that tab for that process step in the process. And then toolshed is now really system tools, special applications like point piling, point clouds, etc. And this reorganization gives us a decent amount of room for future development and adding more commands, which you'll start to see again shortly. We've got a whole bunch of commands in the pipeline that will be released over the next 6 to 8 weeks, I guess. We have a real continued focus on main construction workflow processes steps. So we're still pushing along this image and PDF, data prep, elevate and model, takeoff, reports and drafting kind of process that is really helping people to learn how to use TBC to get takeoffs and data prep done. The market is really growing on the estimating side, especially for us. And we're finding that more and more companies are adopting TBC as a result of this change that we've been making. And that's really helping people to learn and get up to speed quicker. And we still continue to focus on this left to right process. So left to right for menus and left to right within a menu to make it easy for people to understand that I start over here and I move to the right. And that's how I understand which commands I should be using when I'm doing it. And then that's now supplemented with the header bar commands that say, when I'm running this command, what else might I want to use? So if you're running a Rockpile command, the header commands will give you an idea of what other things you might want to do while you're in that command if you're in a specific type of process. So every command improvement, every command has been just reworked from a UI standpoint. Every command has the header bars. You can see the header bars at the top there, where just underneath where it says define extra stations. The header bar will always have the command pane. It will always have the question mark, which is access to help. It will always have the RPS settings, which is the Rockpile R with a little cog icon next to it. And the other header bars are context sensitive. So if you're running a command, in this case, we're showing the define extra stations command. And therefore, with it, while you're in there, you may need these other commands to do it. So things like, creating an alignment, editing alignment labels, building a corridor, those kind of commands are all things that you're likely to want to do if you're going to use the define extra stations command. So we put them in the header. And then within the commands, we've continued to rationalize the show direction and the highlighting of things. So if you're making selections, the highlights will be improved. You've always got the F1 key to access help, and you've always got the command tips at the bottom of the screen. And in there, you always have a help tip as the first one. So F1 or click here to get command help. And if there's anything that might be useful to you while you're in this command, like if you hit V for vector snaps on and off, or you hit N for new line, for example, in some of the commands, anything like hotkeys and little tips will be put into those command tips area to help you get a bit of quick support. But if you want the detailed support, press one of the help methods, so the question mark, the F1 key, or the blue text at the bottom of the screen, and that will take you to the help page on our community. And on there, you'll find full documentation and a video of the command in use, so you can actually learn how to use it. So all these things have been changed, and every single command that has a command pane dialog will now have that structure. Header bar commands, as I've said, this will really help you boost your productivity. In this example, I'm showing the extract surface features command. And while you're doing extract surface features, there are other things you might want along the way. So help is one, RPS settings, you might need to go in and change some of the settings somewhere for something. And then after that, you've got a bunch of commands like take off lines and insert segment and break lines and join lines and change elevation. These are things that you're likely to need to do while you're running this command based on our experience of using the software. As I say, our experience isn't the same as yours. So you may find that, hey, it would be nice if you could add this command, like project cleanup or something like that to the command, because I'm always having to find that command when I'm in this one. So just let us know. And it's easy for me now to go in and change a spreadsheet that when we build the software next time, that spreadsheet drives what goes into the headers. Peter's been building a methodology for that so that it's really easy for us to change the header bar commands and update them when we build a new version of the commands for a release. So this is a big improvement. While we say we're using a spreadsheet, that's just how I log in and put the data in. Peter just reads that spreadsheet per command and then loads the header commands into the code automatically. So it's easy for me to manage it for you, and then Peter can just build the library of the commands very quickly as a result. So it's a nice change. And this is one of the things that I think, differentiates what we're doing compared to anybody else that might be writing TMLs out there, is that we're trying to build a commercial system here that allows us to build product quickly, manage it properly, give you tested, documented, QA'd commands that we know work in both now versions of TBC. And it's hard to do this kind of work, and you need system level programmers like Peter and Win in my team to take care of that. And the guys are doing a phenomenal job of doing that. And we've had to do a lot of work like that in this release to make it easier and faster for us to build new commands and put in automated testing for some of these things to make it possible for us to test these things quickly, at least as a first pass, before we get into what we call usability testing, which is where I get in and take a look at the command and make sure it's going to work for the users. So everything is context related. Now these RPS commands become these, like what I call work process activity hubs. So you come into one of our commands, and from there you can now get access to all the things that you might need while you're working in the product. So you click the header commands, for example. If you're in a command and it needs a boundary, then there's a boundary will be one of the header commands. If you click a command and it needs a reference line or an alignment, then the alignment or the ability to draw a reference line will be in the header. If your command needs a surface model, then the create surface, add and remove surface members, surface boundaries type functions will all be in the header. So you can build a surface while you're in the command just by using the header bar commands. If you're in a point cloud function command like point cloud processor, then it's likely you need, add to region, point cloud by boundary kind of commands to be able to work with the point cloud data. Again, all of those are in the header now. So you can run one of our commands and get access to all the things that you need while you're doing it. And in my testing, it makes my life so much easier because I can just jump around really fast. But if I was doing a real process like slipform paving or like point cloud processing, it just means that everything is in that one command space now. I don't have to worry about which menus I'm on. I don't have to keep changing menus all the time. I don't have to keep looking at toolbars. The 10 commands I need are right in the header there for me to get access. And it makes you more productive, I can guarantee it. Command enhancements. So we've made a lot of changes to commands while we've been open heart surgery on all of them. Commands in the past, we had a lot of commands that were early on TMLs that were written by Trimble that were not necessarily used so heavily, but when you try to use them, they execute once and close. Good example is the point cloud by boundary command. You might have a site limits boundary, then you might have 2 exclusion areas in the model, and you had to run the command 3 times to be able to get it to do what you wanted it to do. Well, now we've made it so it only runs once and it stays open until you close it. It just means that you can do everything you want before you close it. And there were quite a few commands like that. And so all of them, we've changed them so they execute and stay open. And then you close them when you're done, as opposed to execute and close, execute and close, execute and close, which is what was going on with a few of the commands before. So just simple changes like that make just your life easier. Command dialogues that have been restructured for improved workflow and consistency. So we found that there were inconsistencies in the way we said things. There were some command dialogues that weren't laid out quite right. There were some command dialogues where the flow just wasn't right. A good example is radial points. If you kind of create polar rectangular coordinates, you'd click on a location. That was the first thing it asked you for. Where do you want to put this? And as soon as you clicked on that, if you'd already set the settings up, it would just drop it on the screen. And it was too early because you had to put in the settings that you wanted afterwards. So we reorganized it so it now flows from the top to the bottom. And when you get to the bottom, it just creates the object and then moves back up in the list to where it needs to be for the next round of placement. So just the flow works a lot better. And then we made radial point script the same, so they have the same approach. Things like geometric selection, we've changed that so that the filter controls, they're much more obvious whether they're activated or not activated. So just people would lose sight of, there was a little checkbox that said it was enabled in the header of the command, but you could easily miss it. Now you can more easily see it because the dialog area is grayed out when it's not made live. So if you're not using a length filter or an aspect ratio filter, it's more obvious. Things like add ISOPAC, we completely reworked that command, and now it's phenomenal. As a command, we had quite a lot of calls over the last few weeks about, hey, is there a command like this? We used to have one in TerraModel that did this, and add ISOPAC now in TBC is fantastic for adjusting surfaces for things like, you're going to taper a road into a bridge deck or something like that, and you want to make an adjustment of an inch, but over a decent distance, you can build an ISOPAC surface to correct the surface and then apply it, and it will adjust the surface for you automatically. So it makes a really good job of fixing surfaces and improving them to make them match up. Things that have had use cases that were not quite right, or things that needed to be fixed and we hadn't had time to fix them. So good example is crop crossing in two-line mode. It wasn't working on clotheslines. It wasn't working on lines with varying shape. We've gone through and reworked that command significantly so that the two-line mode now works great. Smart join, we've had a lot of feedback around smart join is great for 2D lines. It's great for 3D lines with the same elevation. Not so great for 3D lines with variable elevation, because normally you want to join stuff before you start elevating it. But it's inevitable at some point you want to join 3D lines together. So we did a decent amount of work in this release around 3D lines, joining them. And we've got a bit more work to do there. Wynn's going to work on that over the next few weeks. And hopefully we'll have another update of Smart Join in the not too distant future that really nails the 3D joining functionality. 3D joining is extremely complicated. Those of you who've discussed it with me understand, I think, better than maybe the average user would look at it and go, how hard is it to join two 3D lines? But because of the way TBC allows you to store heights along lines, and whether they have extend lines enabled or not, there's so many variations in there that can go wrong. We've really worked through what it's going to take to do that right, and Wynn's now got his marching orders to get that to work. He's done a decent amount of the work in this first pass. This new version of it is much stronger. The next version will be even better. So just keep an eye on for that one as we go over the next few weeks. Things like convert to line string, the filter vertical nodes on polylines worked, but you had to run the command twice to do it. Now you don't, it does it automatically. Things like extract surface features, the templates function that worked originally got broken along the way somewhere, but now it's back again and it's working great now. Things like multiple offset line command. If you had a big template library like I do, because I support a lot of people and I'm building templates all the time, it was taking minutes in recent weeks to load my template library. Now it's a couple of seconds. So Wynn's done a great job of optimizing the way that we load the template data out of these settings files so that now it's super fast now. So it works really good. And then things like increment text, which is a part of the cross sections workflow. That command didn't work great for variable stationing. So if it went 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, it was fine. But if you had to put in 52.6, the next increment was 70, it didn't go to 60 and that kind of thing. So we've improved that. So it works much better now. And then Peter's been working a lot on major improvements to the parting workflows. That's become a real focus for us as a company. We get a lot of solar farm companies looking for help around that, and we're doing a lot of work in that space, and we're making that a real focus for this year. And we're making great progress around the QA, the documentation. We're now moving into some of the sort of redesign of piles based on new ground conditions and stuff like that. So there's a lot of cool stuff coming out of that, along with Win, as his kind of pet project is point clouds. And that's where Win's focusing a lot of his effort is around point clouds and BIM objects and IFC files and solids and stuff like that. So we're trying to get more into that as we move forward. Things like highlighting, as I say, when you go into some commands, you just have to pick a line or something like that. Sometimes you have to pick a line and some points, and sometimes you have to pick, 2 or 3 things. And when you do that, there's kind of multiple selections that are going on, like QA lines and things like that. So you have to use what we call the global selection, which is your initial selection that you make. And then after that, there's primary and secondary selections that happen, and they all get colored differently. And then the line weights get, made heavier, and then you show direction and stuff like that. It was a little inconsistent how it was working, and in some cases just didn't work at all. And so Peter's been putting a lot of time and effort into building a better highlighting engine so that now when we're using that in any command, it's a standard and it will always work the same way for all types of feature data. So that's going to be, it's a nice little improvement that you'll see as you go along the way. You probably won't even notice it. It's just, you'll just find it's a little bit better than it was before. And then things like, we're starting to add things like rock grips to more commands, like the insert segment command. You can add segments, but if you make a mistake, you can grab rock grips and move the segments into the right place. And I'll show you these kind of things in a few minutes. So one of the questions we're going to get asked a lot is, are there any all new commands in version 5.9? So because of all the changes in the infrastructure behind the scenes, we decided that we would focus our effort in this release to get what we've got out today out in the 5.9 environment, and just focus on this usability and workflow improvements and rationalizing of the commands and making them just more consistent in use. And that became our primary focus in this release. So rather than trying to say we're going to develop new commands in parallel and release them, we've been doing that, but we've got them held back, and we're in the final stages of development of a few things, and they will be released over the next few weeks. So you should see us returning to normal in terms of developing and releasing new commands again. But this process has taken us, a good chunk of the first half of this year to get this right. And as I say, it's given us an opportunity to revisit a lot of things and make some usability improvements, which I think you're going to like. And we're all set now for the next 3 years of development. Somebody laughed the other day and they said, "Anna, how long's Rockpile been going?" And I said 3.5 years, and they couldn't believe it. It's going so fast, and we're all having a great time. But when you get a chance to reset like this, it's a pain, but it's actually a really good thing to do, because now I think we're really set for this next 3 years of development. So RPS 5.9 has been an extremely significant development effort. Can't stress that enough. We apologize for the delay in releasing the package. We understand that TBC 5.9 came out at the start of June. We hope to release that week. There were some changes made at the 11th hour by Trimble that screwed us up, and the TML stuff has been a way bigger effort than we expected it to be. It's been a combination of about 4 months of development for 2 people, and me in testing for the last 4 to 5 weeks, almost full time, to try to get this out the door. And I want to really thank, the whole RPS team. I can't stress that this has been a team effort, that we couldn't do it without the developers. We couldn't do it without the support guys, Shane and Chris, specifically on the testing side, Trev keeping the lights burning for the customer level and feeding back on stuff and helping us with some of the testing, and Fergus keeping the marketing piece going along while we've been busy doing this stuff. And as a team, I think it's been a fantastic process, really, to kind of watch the team evolve, and we hope you like the results. So let's take a look at what this looks like and how it really comes together here. So if we take a quick look at just the main things I've been talking about, menus, these are the 5 menus that we now have. If you don't want these menus, you don't want the unlicensed command, you can go to the toolshed menu. And if you go into like our menu manager command, in menu manager, you can reset the RPS menus. So you can say remove the RPS menus or add them back, and you can just reset them. And if you reset them, it puts all 5 menus up. If you don't want the unlicensed command, you can hit the toggle license commands, And if you see that there's any icons that don't look right, you can hit refresh icons and it will just refresh the icons from the database so that you get the latest, greatest icons on your menu system. And then you get into the menus. This is the basic menu that most customers are using. You can add the corridors and other things. So you can go to support still. We've added things like menu manager and toolbar manager to the support menu so that you can get access to the menu command without having our menus enabled. And things like our toolbar manager, we figured that people may look in here for it, so we put it onto this menu as well. And that's what controls these toolbars along the bottom of the menu here. If you want to turn ribbons off, you can also go into set ribbon tabs, and in there you can turn on and off the different menus of the system. So they're all there. These are all the ones that are turned off. So if, for instance, you want to do a 2D takeoff, you can add that, and the 2D takeoff will then be added to your menu ribbon in that location, and that will then contain a mixture of both Rockpile commands and Trimble commands. So we've spent more time putting our commands in amongst Trimble commands to give you a more dedicated workflow. So for example, in image and PDF, copy to clipboard allows you to bring in images from PDFs that you crop and paste them into the drawing. You might want to use our PDF Vectors on Demand command in preference to vectorizing the whole job, or you might just want to use the georeferencing images and the boundaries and the Google Earth functionality of the standard TBC product. So we've mixed all these up into a common workflow. Again, we're starting at the process here, and you move left to right within the menu. And when you're done with this one, you move to data prep. And in here, data prep isn't a linear process. So you have like selection controls, you have digitizing, you have cleanup, you have CAD functionality, you have edit functionality, and you have layer functionality. And this is the place to go if you want to do any of the sort of CAD editing, data modeling type stuff. Then you go into elevate and model, and that is more linear. You're in this elevate process right here, or you might be in the modeling process right here, and you'll see half of the commands here are Rockpile commands and half the commands are Trimble commands, and things like the create composite surface, which is new to 5.9 of TBC, is now incorporated in that modeling menu. If we go back to the home menu, the things like reference files, we put that in the home menu because we figured that's something you do kind of to manage your system. And you can now create reference files, you can add reference surfaces, and you can use the reference file view filter manager to look at the view filters in the reference files that you've got loaded. So you'll see that everything has been updated for this menu configuration, and this is the menu configuration you can download from the Rockpile community, or if you ask Trev nicely, I'm sure he'll send it to you. Takeoff, surfaces, drafting, sheet layout. These are the sort of main workflows, and then now you're into Rockpile menus. And as you can see, we've got the data prep, modeling, reporting menus. Modeling is now significantly reduced from a menu configuration. It doesn't change our licensing, but the reporting and drafting functionality is now being moved to here. So you've got exports, you've got reports that we generate, and you've got the drafting functionality that we add to TBC drafting here. But these commands, if they're mainstream type functions, you'll find them in these menus over here as well. So these menus are optional. Most of the commands will be in these menus, but the ones that are more kind of secondary commands, I would call them, they're going to be sitting on these menus for you to use as and when you see fit. So that's the menu configurations. Then when you get into the commands, you can see in this command, even with menu manager, there's things you might want to do while you're managing menus. So here we've got the question mark for help. We've got RPS settings. And then here we've got the set ribbon tabs. Here we've got customize ribbon. Here we've got toolbar manager. And here we've got define command shortcuts. So all the things that you might want to do while you're managing menus, toolbars, configuration, those commands are all fired up from within here as you see necessary. So you don't have to then go to other menus to go find these functions, because if you go to menu manager, everything you need is in one place. And that's kind of nice. If you then run other commands, like let's just start off with things like insert line segment. So if I go in here and I just say draw a polyline, for example, let's start with that. And I zoom in a little bit here. If I say let's draw a polyline from here to here to here to here to here, let's put it on layer 0. And then we say, okay, that's a Trimble command. And you can see there's no header command. So I have no choice but to either close the command or leave it running and then find another command I want to run. But if you go into our command now, like data prep and insert line segment now has header commands that are context related. If you want to go in and add segments to this line, you can grab the line itself. And when you do that, you can add segments to the end. You can add segments to the other end. You can go in here and add segments in the middle of a segment. And if you make a mistake, you can go to rock grips and you can grab those and move them into position. and then go back into editing. So this is kind of like turning this in, but now if I want to break that line, I can hit break, I can go here, I can close that command, and I'm back to inserting line segment on this one right here. And again, I can just start clicking and carry on. So the beauty of these is that it's not another command on a different menu. These things you hook up, the line is carried into the command that's being executed. You can do the change, and then you can come back and carry on, or you can jump into rock grips and start editing and modifying the line as you see fit to get it to match up. So when you're digitizing, it's inevitable that you'll make mistakes when you're digitizing, but these kind of tools allow you to really fix up line work really quickly just by using simple commands in here without having to close the command just so you can get to the grips to move things and then come back into the command to continue what you were doing. So this is where the header bar commands really come into fruition. If I go to things like station offset points, what else might you want to do while you're doing station offset points? You might want to offset a line. You might want to use multi-offset line. You might want to create points. You might want to create radial points, etc. Because this is a point creating tool. So all the point creating tools are all in the header file here, which makes it easy for you to get access to them. So while it may look like a small change, this is where production really starts. You get the ability to jump around, jump to a command, and when you're done, you close that command, you're back where you left off. You can then go into the other functions if you need to. So one point creation function that gives you access to all of the other point creation functions that you might need. When you do things like point cloud processor, if I go to the toolshed menu and pick up point cloud processor, if I run that command, the header bar commands, in here, things you might need to draw a boundary so you can actually add an inclusion or exclusion area. So you've got the takeoff lines and the boundary function here. You might need to sample region, so you can use the sample point cloud region function. You might need to create a point cloud boundary, so you can run the point cloud boundary. If you want to add a region or create to a region, you can do that. If you want to use keep in and keep out or add contours, you can do all of that too. So everything is within this command and within the header, so that while I'm doing this, if there's something I need to do, I can execute it from here and then come back and carry on, rather than go, okay, which menu is that on? I go over here and change that, then come back over here to this menu. It saves you a lot of time and effort just by knowing that the header commands are context related and they should all be in the header bar. And as I say, if you find that all the time you run this command and you go up here to look for a command and it's not there and you feel like it should be, just let us know, because it takes me 2 minutes to add it to the spreadsheet. That means next time we build that command, that header bar could be improved or added to as you see fit. Now, we don't want to change the main structure of this, but if somebody says, I never use that one, can we take it away? We might do a poll on that and see whether that's true, or decide whether we think you're right or wrong on that. But if you say, let's add something to that menu, as long as we're not going to stretch this to 100 commands and everything becomes a menu, try to limit this to less than 10 commands, because too many makes it too difficult. But 10 commands that are context related or less is something that we think is extremely usable. And you can resize the dialogue a little bit, especially if you're using a widescreen monitor. Most of you have got a lot of real estate, so you can make the command pane much wider than you would do normally, and that gives you access to all of the commands that you see fit relating to the function that you're doing. And every single command has had that treatment. So now you've got all of this at the header, and every command has these command tips at the bottom to kind of give you some indication of things that you might want to know while you're in the command. And then every command has got help from the help button that takes you directly to the community page. And then within that, you've always got the video right at the bottom here that shows you how to use it. And there might be more than one video that covers more than one aspect of the use of that command embedded within the help document. So that's, standardization, continuous evolution and improvement is a big thing of this release. So what else has changed within here? We talked about, highlighting and things like that. Let me just start a new project here a minute. And I'm going to bring in something to show you crop crossing to give you an example of how highlighting has been improved. So if I just go to so this will show both the improvements to crop crossing, but also how highlighting has been improved here. So within this is an example of a job where you've got lots of curb and gutter lines, and you've got contours, and you want to crop the contours between the two lines. When we first wrote this command, the two-line mode worked maybe a little bit better than it has been more recently. I'm not sure when it got changed and why. But when we started looking into it, the code just wouldn't have done things correctly, especially with things like closed lines, or in this case, in this particular job, there's a number of examples of This is a data set I got from a customer, and he said it's absolutely horrible on this. You can see this line comes around, and then it's not parallel with this one, and it finishes beyond the end of this one, and it just didn't work at all in those situations. So they asked us to look at, could we rework it to make it, again, more usable? So if you go to data prep now and you go to crop crossing, and if we pick some of these lines, we've made some improvements into the area between two lines mode. And in this case, I'm using the entire line. And so if I go in here and say, pick line 1, it highlights correctly. Pick line 2, it highlights. And then the secondary highlight is now used in between. Now, the way we handle non-parallel lines is we look for the end of one line, look for the nearest end of the other line, and we close it out to make a closed area in that situation. And that applies on both ends here. In this case, this was a closed end. You can see it joins across the end here to give you a thing. But this point is right here. We have this expansion area, which allows you to expand left and right of the selected lines so that you get a bigger clipping area. And then you can just go down here, pick the contours that you want to crop out by layer. So you just click on the layer that you want, close out, and now you hit apply. At that point, now it's cropped all those lines to that, and you're ready to go to the next one. So you pick line 1, line 2, and now it's ready to crop, and you hit apply, and then you go to the next one. And so this is a much faster workflow now than it was before. You just hit apply each time or enter, and now it's cropping the contours within those curve and gutter lines, and you can run through a data set much quicker now than you could before, and the highlighting is working much better as a result. So that kind of command, the highlighting is an important factor. The workflow within the dialog was improved and refined, and we fixed some issues with the two-line mode specifically. But if you're looking at like single line mode, and let's say we run that in portion mode, then this works in the same way. If I pick a line that's my reference line, it will highlight, and then I can say I want my two offsets, and I can mirror them. So now I've got the offsets on the other side, and now I can say I want to do a portion of the line, and I want to do it from here to here. And now you can see the highlights change and the area of highlight goes on. So again, this just didn't work well from a highlighting perspective in the previous releases. Now it works a lot nicer, so you can see exactly what you're doing as you're working through the system. And again, you've got the header bar commands to jump to things you want, and you've got the help down here and the help up here, and you've got command tips that give you additional information should it be relevant. So just things like that make a massive difference to workflows. If we look at things like slip form paving workflow, if I just start another new project here and take a look at that. If I go to slip form paving, and I'm going to pick up a data set, which is the Trimble building that was built when I was there. Here we've got the parking lot information. So if I just pick the curb lines for this and isolate or view only that layer, so I've got just that layer visible. So our slip form paving workflow starts at the optimize line string function. So if I go in here, optimize line string, now you'll see that in this workflow, in this command, the header bar commands, come on. Just give me a second here. For some reason, the server's taking a long time to respond. There we go. Okay, so now if I go in here and I say, we start off with pick all the lines that we want to optimize, set our optimization parameters. These are now in RPS settings, so that you can now set these centrally and use them in all commands that need optimization. You can say I want to create line strings or alignments in the normal way, and then we can hit the OK button, and that will create me the layer of optimized lines. So if I go into, once it's done this now, it's just finishing up here. It's just taking more.
Time for a new computer.
No. Something going on with the server on the back end, I think. I hope. I'm just going to start another version of TBC just in case I need one. It's coming back now, I think. Here we go. It's come back now. Okay, so now it created me these optimized lines on this layer, right? So I can turn off the original. These are the optimized lines. And so things like if I click on this line right here, let's just leave these two lines on a minute. If I click on the optimized line and I hit the profile viewer button, that lets me see the profile through that line. If I click on the unoptimized line and hold the shift key down and click on this button, now I can see the profiles of both lines at the same time. So here's the optimized line, here's the unoptimized line. So you can see the difference it made all the way along the process. So again, from the header bar commands, if there were duplicate lines, I could use the project cleanup to remove duplicates. If I want to go in and explode the lines, which is the next step in the workflow, then I can turn off the source line, close out my profile viewer, and click on the next button in the process, which is explode. And I can then say, pick all these lines that I just created and explode them. And now they're all individual segments of lines. You can see they're broken at all the right points for the paver. So now I've done the exploding. The next step of the line is to extend the line. So I can run extend. And now I can pick all the lines that I want to extend, set my parameters and hit apply. And now I've extended them. The last process step is I want to go to XML. So the 4 commands all have the same headers in the same position. So when you move from step 1 to step 2 to step 3 to step 4, all you need to do is hit the next button in the sequence on the header bar to take you to that point. So now I can export them to XML, pick the lines in here. And at that point, now I can say, okay, export those to XML, and they would go out to my XML file. So again, looking at the way the header bars integrate with the process is if you get the right header bar commands for the right command, then it's easy to move quickly through the process without having to remember that some of the buttons are on this menu and some of them are on this menu and some of them are on this menu over here. Now you just run step 1, 2, 3, 4 through the menu and you're done. And if there's other things you need along the way, like project cleanup, then we put that on there too, so that it's easy for you to manage it. So that's like the header bar commands functionality in here. If we do things like point cloud processor, just as another example, just to kind of show that. So if I go to File New here and say OK. And in here, if I bring in a point cloud file, this is a reservoir project here in Colorado. This is about 25 million points or something like that. So that takes a few seconds to load. Okay, so then if I bring in, let's say, some exclusion areas in a site limits file. So my green line around the outside is my site limits. The red areas could be exclusion areas for some reason. This is just a demonstration. This isn't real, but the purpose is to show you kind of what the way we're thinking here is. If you're in the toolshed menu and you run point cloud processor, if I needed to create those boundaries, then the boundary in the takeoff lines is up here in the header. So I can draw these while I'm in the command from these header bars. If I need to use the point cloud by boundary command to limit the point cloud to just this area, I can run the point cloud by boundary command while I'm here, pick the limits boundary right here, and that will highlight the area of the data for that site limits. And now what's the next step? I need to create a region. So I go to the create region command, which is back here, and I want to create this. It's called site limits, and say OK. And so now I've created my region directly while I'm in here. So I can turn off in the point cloud regions, I can turn off everything apart from the site limits data. And that's now color coded it based on my elevation range for the job. Now, if there's some other boundaries, the point cloud by boundary command is still running, whereas before it used to close. Now I can just say, okay, well, I want to exclude this area right here. And what do I want to do with that? Well, I want to create a region out of that. So I'm going to say create a region, and I'm going to call it, exclusions, and say, okay. And now that's been put in the exclusions area, so I can turn the exclusions off, and that will be a hole in my model. Same with this one over here. So again, I come back to here, click on this boundary, and I can then say that's now wetland areas, but I want to add it to a region. So I'm going to go add point region, and I'm going to set it to my exclusions area and say add. And so that point calculated will now disappear. Now I've got down to just the data I care about. The next thing I might want to do is I might want to, if I close out this one as well, I'm back in here. I can now say sample the point cloud region because I want to take this down from being, let's say, I want to create an output called sample. I pick the point cloud that I want to sample, this one, and I say, well, I want 10 million points or 2 million points out of that file. So I hit store. And so now it's creating a sample of 10 million points for me of that point cloud, reducing it by a further 50%. So now I'm looking at my sample file. Now I can run point cloud processor on that. So again, I'm in the point cloud processor command. So now I can just pick the point cloud itself, specify my parameters that I want, and then run the point cloud processor to reduce this down to what I'm looking for. So again, by putting these headers up here, I just took the highlights out of the point cloud menu and put them in here because those are the functions that I use every time I do this process. And now I can just run along the header here with all the tools. And at the end of it, when I want to build the surface model, I've got my create quick contours. I've got my create contours functionality up here because the point cloud processor builds the surface, but it doesn't build the contours. So I can add the contours here at the end of the process. So again, I can take a point cloud, build the boundaries, reduce the point cloud, sample it, make regions as I need to, and then run the point cloud processor to reduce it and make the surface model, and I can use the contours all within one process step here. So the point cloud processor becomes a hub that seeds that whole mechanical 1-step, 2-step, 3-step, 4-step, 5-step process to get you through the job quickly. And if you're a new user, just knowing that if I run this command, the other things I'm going to need are going to be in the header bar is kind of handy to learn because you don't have to then know where do I find all these commands on all these other menus. You can just go into that command. Once you've learned that one, everything you need is there. And this is the process that we've tried to take with every single one of the commands is what do I do while I'm in here and how is this going to make me faster? Things like the piling menus are the same thing. So you start with Pile Definition Manager, and when you're in that command or this command or this command, doesn't matter which one you run in the header bar, the other commands are all there too, right? So you can run RPS settings to get to your settings. You can get the Pile Definition Manager. You can get the piling QA report, and you can create surfaces because that's function that you need to do while you're doing piling. So the header bar commands really make a difference even in that workflow as well. And so we're looking for more and more input on that. So as a takeaway, as a user, if you've got workflows that you're running where you feel like you run a Rockpile command to start you off, but there's things that you want to do while you're in there, let us know what they are, because that's how we would like to evolve this process to make these individual commands work process hubs that allow you to really execute quickly. In terms of other things that have been improved, most of the changes you're going to see are going to be relatively quick, simple wins that happen. As I say, things like radial point script, that's probably the best example that I can show you in here. Maybe not a command that everybody uses every day, but if you have a set of radial points for a circular gas container or a circular building or something like that, where you've got a set of points by polar rectangular coordinates, if you run radial points, before when we did this, it asks you for the point ID, it asks you for the code. Before, it used to ask you those at the end after the data creation piece was created. In here, it asks me what layer you want to put it on, what bearing you want to start it at, what angular interval you want, 10 degrees, and you want to create the radial lines and the radial points connected around the outside radius. What radius do you want? Let's say I want 10 feet. Let's do 20 feet here. And then where's the center point right here? And what elevation did you want? 100. Now when I hit enter, it will create me that. If I hit apply there and look at layer 0, it creates you that object directly. Now it jumps you back in the sequence to what you want to do next. So depending on these settings on these buttons right here, you could then turn these on and off. So you could say, okay, well, the next one I want to do is 45 degrees. And in this case, I want to do a radius of 30. And I want the center point to be in the same place. And at that point, now it's created you the next one, for example, because I've got sticky buttons set on these. So as you run through this, depending on what sticky buttons you have, the cycling around this is fully automatic. So you can make really fast changes, but it doesn't execute until you get to the bottom of that list of functions. And depending on what stickies you have, it will execute. So now this is much faster to use, much easier to use because the cycling within the dialog is much more logical. And because we changed it here, again, we put all the header bars for point creation up here, so you can use this command and get to all the other point creation functions you might want. And we made the same exact changes to the point script function here, where you use the scripting to build it, but the way we apply the scripting is built the same way with the same sequence at the bottom here. So again, just rationalization and refinement, because these two commands were written at two different times. They weren't 100% consistent with each other, let alone within the system. And now they are, and now they flow much better. And you can find, again, production comes from a little bit of a speed improvement in terms of just the ease of use and the flow of the dialogue. So you're going to find that pretty much everywhere within the commands that got touched. Hopefully you like all these changes that are being made. There's too many to go through one at a time and show you them all, but just be aware that if you're in a command, you might find it slightly differently laid out to the way it was before, or maybe completely laid out differently to the way it was before, but that was done to make it much faster in use and much more streamlined. And again, I don't get a chance very often to go through and touch every single command over a period of 5 to 6 weeks, where I get a chance to really eat our own dog food on every single command. In this case, I've done that, and we've made a lot of really good changes, I think, to a lot of commands, just because we've had a chance to go back and look at what we were doing and try to work out, is that the best we can do, or can we improve it? In that process, we've also identified probably 20 or 30 things that we would like to do to some of the commands to make them better and add more functionality to them. And we've listed those up. And our goal is to go back and revisit that over the next 3 months. So by the end of the next quarter, hopefully we'll have some improvements to some of the commands that have some additional feature set that we've either been asked for or that we can see a need for based on input we're getting to help you. And we do have, as I say, several commands in the wings. We have a CAD cleanup command coming soon. Wynn's just finishing that one up. We hope that it will be done by the end of next week. Peter's working on some piling improvements, as well as a label lines function that's getting close to completion now. And now we've got this version behind us, they can get back to full-time development on those and get those wrapped up. And we have a lot of ideas around what we're going to do with things like our volumes manager command and some more of the data prep and takeoff functionality that we need to do, as well as some additional functions we're going to do for the solar farm workflow. That is our plan for the next sort of 3 months of work. But if you have input, as always, please give us it and provide it to us. Please comment and feedback anything that you've seen here that you like or you don't like. And as you start to use it, please take a look at the command header bars, especially as you're using the product. Start to use them, and if you feel like there's things missing, please feed that back to me and the team. Just send us emails from the Toolshed menu. So if you go into Toolshed and go to support or contact, either one of these two will get an email to us with your comments or your feedback. Just click on one of those, fill in your feedback, and send it to us, and we'll look at improving the headers as we need to as you start digging into that. But we now have a really easy process for making that possible. So it doesn't take us a couple of minutes to change anything there. Not that we want to change it continuously, but we want to make sure we're giving you what you guys really want. So that's basically the update. It's a lot of stuff, a lot of improvements. I think you're going to like it. I think you're going to find it fun to use. I've certainly started to enjoy the testing in the last couple of weeks as we've been nailing down all of the last minute changes. And as I say, they're all done now, and the release should be this afternoon, and you should see it before mid-afternoon at some point, 3:30, 4 o'clock or something like that. You should see it Mountain Time at some point this afternoon. So anyway, I'm going to sit on the call. If you've got questions, or what I'd like to do is just, can you give me the hand up if you like what you've seen today? Does anybody have any comments or feedback about what you've seen, or have any questions? Please unmute yourself and ask a question if you feel like it, or you can put something into the chat should you want to do that. So I say we're 100% committed to making sure we keep these products up to date, and we are really committed to helping and supporting the user base and trying to make sure that you get the best out of these tools. You know, one of the things that I've heard this year in talking to people that I feel aren't using the tools enough, you know, they buy them, but they're not using them as much as I would like them to be using them, and not as much as I think they should be using them, is, you know, I was talking to a guy last week and he said, you know, the problem I have, Alan, is I go to one of these menus and there's 30 commands on it. I have to know which ones are the ones I should really focus on. And that's an area we have to work on more, is what are the best commands for you to be using, and where do you start with any of this stuff? It's the same with starting with TBC. Say, I'm not sure how we make commands highlighted. One of the things I've thought about is maybe making an additional menu like the unlicensed menu, which is like the highlights commands, which would be our biggest hitting commands, not in any particular order or workflow, but more geared around just giving you an idea of this is where you should start. And these are the ones that are probably the biggest hitters. But of course, big hitters depend on you as a user as to what it is you're actually doing and what you're actually doing today, even to get the best out of it. And it's hard to give you the top 8 or top 10 commands that might be useful. But there are some extremely powerful commands in here, like smart join, like point creator, like multi-offset line, like slope designer, that you should look at using in your daily work processes, and hopefully you'll start to do that going forward. This kind of thing with just multi-offset line is one of my favorites. It's not a big change from a usability standpoint, but when you come into modeling and you go multi-offset line, and with my command library or my template library, the fact it will open within a second or two, that's a massive time saving for me, because I use this command all the time. I have dozens of different templates because I work with lots of different people. I have to clean this up on a regular basis because I'm creating, examples all the time. But this file was taking up to 2.5 minutes to open last week. And with the change that we've made in the last week on this command, now it opens in a couple of seconds. And that, again, is a massive boon to production. You're not sitting there waiting for it to load. That was a coffee command before, where you went and got a cup of coffee while it started to open. And just things like that make a massive difference to me anyway, as a user. And hopefully you see the benefit there as you start getting into it. So anyway, if any comments, I'll stick around, and please send us emails and feedback. As always, we love getting it and we love hearing from you. So please let us know what you think, and have a good rest of the weekend and enjoy the 4th of July. And if anybody's looking to buy new licenses, here's the sales plug for today. We have the 4th of July hot dog special next week, starts on Monday and goes on for 2 weeks. You can order it today if you want to. And that's the combo deal for all tools, support, and training. And you'll get 20% off if you buy it in the next 2 weeks. So if you're interested in buying extra licenses for anybody in your team, now's about as good a time to get that as possible if you want the training and the support as part of your package. And if you want anything else, just please connect with Trev or myself, and we'd be happy to send you quotes or whatever you might need for other members of your team. Okay, so anyway, have a good weekend. Enjoy the 4th of July. Don't eat too many hot dogs. Don't drink too much beer, and have a good holiday weekend. And we'll be in touch over the next few weeks. And please look out for that release this afternoon. It should be out there, and hopefully you're going to get a lot out of it if you've upgraded to 5.9. Okay,